I'll never forget the look in my husband's eyes the night I came home from cheating on him. He didn't say a word, just nodded and went back to his book. I thought I'd gotten away with it. I had no idea his silence was just the beginning of the most calculated revenge I'd ever experienced. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Revenge with Mary. This is one of those stories that proves sometimes the quietest revenge is the loudest. If you've ever wondered what happens when a good person finally stops fighting and just lets go, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will haunt you long after it's over. Let's get into it. The moment I walked through the door that evening, wearing a smile that was more mask than happiness, I knew my husband Daniel saw right through me, and his silence over the next 6 months would become the most devastating revenge I never anticipated. I had spent that afternoon doing something unforgivable. Something that betrayed the man who had given me 7 years of unwavering love, patience, and loyalty. His name was Ethan, a colleague from work, someone who made me feel exciting and reckless in a way that my stable, predictable marriage didn't anymore. It had started innocently enough. Flirty texts, long lunches. Then one afternoon in his apartment, I crossed a line I'd sworn I never would. And now, as I stood in the doorway of our quiet suburban home, pretending nothing had changed, I could feel in my bones that everything had. Daniel was sitting on the couch, reading like he always did after work. He was a software engineer, methodical, calm, the kind of man who thought 3 steps ahead in everything. The TV was on, some news channel murmuring in the background, filling the space between us with white noise. When he looked up, his dark eyes met mine for just a second. In that brief moment, I saw it clearly. He knew, not suspected. Not wondered. Knew. My breath caught in my throat. How? I'd been so careful. I'd deleted messages, used cache, made up excuses about working late. But somehow, in that single glance, I understood that my careful lies had been transparent all along. He didn't say a word. Didn't ask where I'd been or why I was home an hour late. He simply gave me a small, unreadable nod and turned back to his book. That single act shattered something inside me. I walked into the kitchen on autopilot, my legs feeling weak, pretending to busy myself with dinner. Every sound seemed amplified. The clatter of dishes, the running tap, the hum of the refrigerator. My hands trembled as I chopped vegetables for a stir-fry neither of us would eat. I kept waiting for him to come in and confront me. To yell, to demand the truth, to ask me how I could do this to us. But he didn't. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, wrapping around me like an invisible noose. When dinner was ready, I called him to the table. He came quietly, sat down, and barely touched his food. Just moved it around his plate with his fork, his expression distant. He didn't look angry. Didn't look sad. Just gone. Like someone had turned off a light behind his eyes. I tried to start a conversation, my voice too bright, too forced. How was work? Did that deployment go okay? Fine. One word. Flat, final. Are you feeling all right? You're not eating much. I'm fine, Madison. That calmness, that terrible, unnatural calmness, hurt more than if he had thrown the plate against the wall. It was as if he had already accepted something horrible and was methodically moving beyond me, one quiet breath at a time. After dinner, I followed him to the living room like a lost dog, desperate for any sign of the warmth that used to exist between us. I sat beside him on the couch, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The guilt was eating me alive from the inside out. Daniel, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Is something wrong? He turned to look at me, his expression utterly unreadable. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe I was just paranoid. Then he spoke, his voice so soft it was almost gentle. You tell me, Madison. Just those 4 words. That was all. And they broke me completely. I tried to speak, to explain, to confess, but my throat felt like it was closing. The words stuck there, sharp and painful. He didn't ask for details, didn't accuse me of anything specific, didn't demand I admit what I'd done. His silence said everything, that he already knew, and that nothing I could say would undo it. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I forced them back. I didn't deserve to cry. I didn't deserve his comfort or sympathy. I had betrayed his trust in the most fundamental way possible. And now I was facing the quiet, devastating consequence of my own choices. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Daniel in our bed, the same bed where we'd laughed and made love and planned our future, and it felt like lying next to a stranger. He faced the wall, his breathing steady and even. The space between us, just 12 inches of mattress, felt like an ocean. I wanted to reach out, to touch his shoulder, to whisper an apology into the darkness. But I didn't have the courage. I had hurt him in a way that words couldn't fix, and he was too kind, too dignified, to humiliate me by demanding a confession I wasn't brave enough to offer. Days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. Except everything had changed. Daniel didn't leave me, didn't pack his bags or file for divorce. He simply continued, going to work, coming home, eating dinner, sleeping in our bed. But he was a ghost of himself. He was polite, even gentle sometimes. But there was a coldness in his tone that hadn't existed before, a distance in his eyes that no amount of small talk could bridge. He smiled less. The easy laughter that used to fill our home, the inside jokes, the playful teasing, had vanished completely. We were living together, yet miles apart. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always end with dramatic confrontations or broken dishes thrown against walls. Sometimes it ends with silence, the kind of silence that slowly drains the life out of everything you once shared, like air leaking from a tire you can't see. His silence was a mirror, reflecting back the emptiness I had created inside both of us. I kept waiting for him to crack, to scream at me, to demand I leave, to give me something I could respond to, some explosion I could manage. But Daniel had never been that kind of man. He was strategic, patient, and I was beginning to understand that his silence wasn't passive. It was calculated. One evening, about 3 weeks after that terrible night, I found him sitting alone on the back porch, staring into the distance at nothing in particular. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if my chest wasn't so tight with dread. I joined him quietly, sitting in the chair beside him. For a long time we said nothing, just sat there as the light faded and the crickets began their evening song. Then, in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, he said something that made my heart stop. "I loved you more than my pride." Madison. Loved, past tense. There was no anger in his tone, only sorrow. Deep, bottomless sorrow that seemed to age him 10 years in a single sentence. I wanted to beg for forgiveness, to fall to my knees and sob and promise I'd never hurt him again. But I knew that forgiveness wouldn't erase what I had done. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, broken something that could never be fully repaired. He didn't tell his family what I'd done, didn't tell our friends, didn't shame me publicly, or post our dirty laundry on social media like so many betrayed spouses do. He simply carried the pain in silence, letting it shape the growing distance between us. And somehow, that hurt more than any public humiliation could have. Over the next few weeks, Daniel started working longer hours, coming home later, spending more time at the office or meeting with clients. At first, I thought maybe he was having his own affair, some kind of tit-for-tat revenge. Part of me almost hoped for it, because at least that would be something I could understand, something that would even the scales. But I knew better. Daniel wasn't that kind of man. He didn't operate on impulse or emotion. When he moved with purpose. I stayed home most evenings, waiting, hoping, drowning in regret. Every sound of the door opening made my heart jump. But when he walked in, the warmth that used to light up his face when he saw me was gone. He greeted me kindly. "Hey, how was your day?" But not lovingly. Never lovingly anymore. The words were there, but the feeling behind them had evaporated. Then, about 2 months after my affair, small things started happening. Things so subtle I almost didn't notice at first. Our joint credit card, the one we'd used for everything for 7 years, suddenly declined when I tried to buy groceries. I called Daniel, embarrassed and confused. "Oh, yeah," he said calmly. "I opened a new account for my work expenses. Thought it would be easier to track. I'll transfer some money to your personal account." He did, just enough for necessities, nothing more. The next week, I noticed he'd changed the password to our shared streaming accounts. When I asked him about it, he apologized. "Security thing. Work's been having issues with data breaches. I'll write it down for you." He never did. Small things. Inconvenient things. But nothing I could really complain about without sounding paranoid or petty. Then I found out he'd started seeing a therapist. Not couples therapy, individual therapy. When I suggested we go together, to work on us, he smiled that new, cold smile. "I think I need to work on myself first, Madison." "You understand, I didn't understand." But I nodded anyway. 3 months after my affair, Daniel came home with papers. Not divorce papers. Something worse. A post-nuptial agreement. "What is this?" I asked, my hands shaking as I flipped through the pages of legal jargon. "Protection," he said simply. "For both of us. My lawyer suggested it given recent stresses in our marriage." Recent stresses. That's what he called my infidelity. Like it was a budget shortfall or a mild disagreement about vacation plans. The agreement was brutal in its simplicity. If our marriage ended for any reason related to infidelity, I would receive nothing. No alimony, no claim to his retirement accounts or the house we'd bought together, nothing but whatever assets were in my name alone, which was almost nothing. "Daniel, I can't sign this." "Then don't," he said calmly. "But I can't continue in this marriage without it. I need to protect what I've built. Surely you can understand that." The implication was clear. Sign it, or he'd file for divorce immediately, and I'd get even less. I signed it. What choice did I have? That night, lying in bed, I finally understood what he was doing. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't even reconciliation. This was strategic dismantling. He was systematically removing me from his life, financially, emotionally, legally, while maintaining the appearance of a marriage. He was building walls around everything that mattered to him, walls I couldn't scale or break through, and he was doing it all so quietly, so methodically, that I couldn't even call it cruelty. It was just self-preservation. 4 months after my affair, I made a terrible mistake. I reached out to Ethan again. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I was trying to recapture that feeling of being wanted. Maybe I was just lonely. Maybe I was self-destructing. We met for coffee. Just coffee. We didn't even touch, but we talked and laughed. And for an hour, I felt like someone actually saw me again. I came home that evening to find Daniel sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. "Madison," he said, his voice still calm, still controlled. "We need to talk." My blood turned to ice. He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a photo, taken through the window of the coffee shop where I'd met Ethan. The timestamp was from 2 hours ago. "I hired a private investigator," Daniel said matter-of-factly. "After the first time. I needed to know if it was ongoing or if you'd stopped." "Daniel, we just had coffee." I don't care what you did or didn't do," he interrupted, his voice still eerily calm. "I care that you're still lying, still sneaking around, still making choices that disrespect our marriage." He closed the laptop. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. The Post-Nup makes this very simple. You'll have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." I started crying then. Real ugly crying. "Please, Daniel. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. You had months to suggest therapy, Madison. Months to come clean. To fight for us. You chose not to." He stood up, picking up his laptop. "I chose to protect myself instead." He walked toward the bedroom, then paused at the doorway. "You know what the worst part is?" he said, not turning around. "I really did love you more than my pride, but you loved your own selfishness more than you loved me." Those were the last meaningful words he ever spoke to me. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Because of the Post-Nup I'd signed, I walked away with almost nothing. My car, my personal savings account, which had about $3,000 in it, my clothes, the house, the investment accounts, the retirement funds Daniel had been building for a decade. All his. I had to move in with my sister Sophia. Sleeping on her couch, trying to rebuild a life I'd demolished with my own hands. Daniel never badmouthed me. Never told our mutual friends the real reason for the divorce. When people asked, he'd simply say, "We grew apart. These things happen." His grace somehow made it worse. I heard through Abigail, a mutual friend, that he'd started dating someone new about 6 months after our divorce was finalized. A woman named Teresa from his gym. She was kind, Abigail said. Genuine. The kind of person who made Daniel laugh again. When I heard that, something inside me finally broke completely. Not with anger or jealousy, but with the crushing weight of understanding. Daniel's revenge wasn't the divorce. It wasn't the post-nup or the private investigator or taking the house. His revenge was simply moving on. Living well, finding happiness with someone who actually deserved him, while I was left with nothing but the memory of what I'd destroyed. Now, 2 years later, I still think about that evening when I walked through the door wearing a smile that was more mask than happiness. I wish I could go back and stop myself. I wish I could grab my past self by the shoulders and scream, "He knows, and his silence is going to destroy you more completely than any words ever could." Because that's exactly what happened. Daniel never yelled, never threw things, never called me names, or tried to hurt me the way I'd hurt him. He simply protected himself, quietly dismantled our life together, and walked away with his dignity intact. His silence wasn't just painful. It was the echo of love dying slowly, one unspoken word at a time. And by the time I realized what was happening, by the time I understood that his quietness wasn't forgiveness but strategy, it was already too late. I had lost everything, not because he took it from me in rage, but because he calmly, methodically, made sure I had nothing left to take. That's the thing about silent revenge. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give you a chance to fight back. It just unfolds, inevitable as sunrise, until you're standing in the ruins wondering how you got there. And the answer is simple. You walked yourself there, one betrayal at a time. All right, so here's my question for you guys. Was Daniel wrong? Because here's the thing. He never yelled, never exposed her, never tried to destroy her reputation. He just protected himself. The post-nup, the private investigator, the quiet exit strategy. Was that revenge, or was that just refusing to be a victim twice? Madison says his silence was crueler than any confrontation could have been. But honestly, I think Daniel gave her exactly what she gave him. Nothing. She gave him nothing. No honesty, no loyalty, no chance to fight for their marriage. So he gave her nothing back. Clean, calculated, final. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a line between self-preservation and cruelty, and Daniel crossed it. That's what I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now. Team Daniel or Team Madison? And more importantly, have you ever been on either side of this kind of silent revenge? Because I bet some of you have stories that'll blow this one out of the water. If this one made you think, hit that like and subscribe to join the Revenge with Mary family. We're here for the messy, complicated stories that don't have easy answers. Remember, sometimes the loudest revenge is the one you never hear coming. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.